we must learn we're all born with specialness inside of us. That is what we're talking about right now. Like, we all deserve to be loved.
Welcome back to our podcast, As Above.
So Below.
I'm Silver, your co-host, and I'm so excited to be back with you all to start off our Taurus-Scorpio episode. I am a Pisces rising, Sagittarius sun, Taurus moon, for those of you that forgot. And my pronouns are she, they.
And I'm your co-host, Toni. I am equally excited to talk about this axis and continue our series on the astrological axes. And I am a Pisces rising, Taurus sun, Libra moon. And I think this is the last time I'm going to say it on the episode because I feel like
I think they need to be reminded every time.
I thought might be a little bit much. So
all right. We'll just say our Pisces rising in case you guys forgot.
Yeah,
we're both Pisces rising.
In case we haven't said it like a million times. Anyways, yeah, and I use she, her pronouns. And yeah, I'm excited to get on this conversation about Taurus and Scorpio.
Yes. So we are currently recording at 5:30 p.m. on September 16th. It's exciting stuff. We're in Virgo season at the moment. I think we were for the last recording as well, but that hasn't been released yet.
Yes. Hoping that our Virgo grandmas will protect us during the Mercury retrograde release that we so boldly decided to do. So for all of y'all who might be confused as what we're talking about, we released our first episode 2 days ago on September 15th.
Yesterday.
Oh yeah, that was yesterday. Literally Mercury retrograde.
So much time has passed by.
I know. We released our first episode yesterday during Mercury retrograde. Some would say a very risky decision, but I mean, we couldn't just wait for Mercury to get her shit together like later.
Yeah. We had planned the date and then we were like, oh wait, Mercury. But as a natal Mercury in retrograde person, it's nothing I'm not used to. I feel like it just requires a little bit extra thought. For the average person. For me, that's my natural state is overthinking. So however, we did have some technical difficulties when starting. My computer just randomly turned off and we're like, ha.
Yeah. Mercury retrograde has definitely been doing its thing. Debit card information somehow leaked, so I had to get a new debit card today.
Oh my God,
maybe I
didn't know
telling people whoever took my information, they might be listening. I'm kidding.
We know who you are, and we will find you.
And it's wild but it was like one of those moments where it's like, I hate that this happened, but like astrologically, it made so much sense because Mercury's retrograding in the sign of Libra, and that's my 8th house, which is like can be about finances and like debt and like just things that have to do with like shared resources. And so the fact that my resources were shared with who knows who, requiring me to have to revisit and go back and go to the bank, get a new card. That's a very Mercury retrograde through the 8th house experience.
Yeah. That's so funny. Wait, so did anyone like use the card or no?
Yeah, like that's how so this has been happening apparently for a little bit because I saw like some charges from Italy.
Damn, like, she just got it like that, guys. She doesn't even notice.
I'm just afraid to check my bank account. That's the difference. So I like randomly looked and I saw that there were charges from Italy, and then like they were taken out, but then they were put back. So I was like, what the hell? And then I saw a charge for like $33 from this like Florida health, like just some clearly not me shit. So I was like, okay, we have a problem. And I'm literally like freaking out. Like I'm like texting my boyfriend and everything. And he used to work at a bank. So he's like, it's fraud. Like it happens all the time. Just get a new card. And I'm like,
it's just fraud.
what do you mean? What?
Why me?
I'm the
And he's
victim.
like, it literally happens to 70 people a day at my bank. And you're like, no,
Literally,
but me.
I was literally like, I'm a victim of fraudulent activity. Like I am a victim of fraud.
Have some compassion.
Like I was upset. But anyways, I got my new card today. I was very efficient with it. I didn't let it get to me too much. And we're here. We got a new card. Ain't nobody gonna get that information. Hopefully.
Hold up your card real quick. I'm just trying to see something. Okay. Yeah. So that is our experience of Mercury in retrograde, I guess. Besides that, today's actually a Gemini moon, so fun times we're talking.
Yes, my grandma is a Virgo sun, Gemini moon.
She's really saying hello.
She's literally so mercurial.
I know, and the energy today is so mercurial, but then at the same time there's a retrograde happening. But I feel like it's, for me so far, it feels like fun podcast like energy.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm excited.
Yeah, literally. So there's a bunch of planets in retrograde right now. So there's Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and Chiron. And the other day, my sister texted me and she was like, should I be concerned that there are 6 planets in retrograde right now? I was like, honestly, no, it's fine. Literally, this is all stuff that happens all the time. Like, we've experienced it before and we'll experience it again. It's nothing to be scared of. And also, she's also a natal Mercury in retrograde. So I was like, girl, you're fine. Like, the only thing that would be, I feel like, a little scary is because she's a Libra Mercury and Mercury's in retrograde in Libra. So I was like, but she's used to this. This is her life.
Right.
So I was like, I got it. You're fine. Don't worry.
Yeah.
It was funny.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like generally Mercury retrogrades are like these like ominous, like everybody makes it seem like
Everyone gets so
like
scared about them.
but it
Like
happens
they literally happen like so many times a year.
and they don't all affect you the same way. Like I'm not
Exactly.
this time it was like wow, clear evidence, but it wasn't the worst thing that could happen. And ultimately I was able to, combat it. I know some people are having probably worse experiences and some people might be having the time of their lives. Honestly, it all depends on how it's interacting with your chart overall. But
yeah, and that actually, so the way that you said that like completely depicted your like the planets at that moment reminded me of this time. I actually meant to tell you the second it happened. I was talking to my old roommate and he is an Aquarius rising, and I remember this was the night of the Aquarius full moon. So we were like out at dinner or something, and he was like talking about how he was like, I'm so exhausted. I spent the whole day literally like scooping up buckets of water in my friend's basement because it was like flooding and like blah blah blah. And he literally was like giving me an example, and he was like, I was literally like this. I had to walk out and throw it out. I was like, are you kidding? You an Aquarius rising, the water bearer, literally getting water on an Aquarius full moon. I was like, okay, so okay. He doesn't believe in astrology that much, but I was like, the fact that this is like, it's just so in your face sometimes, and it's so entertaining when that happens. I
love when it's literal like that. Like literal astrology moments. Like I have so many good ones.
So funny. It's like, in case you didn't believe it, in case you were losing your faith in it, here's the situation. Like
I know, but it doesn't hit the same for people who don't like, believe it or anything, because like you have to kind of explain this symbolizes this and it's like
exactly.
But it's like, but when it's like you just have something that happens that's just so on the nose, it's like, what the fuck? Like
it's literally like a cosmic joke. Like it's so funny to me. I feel like it's an insider between me and the universe. I'm like,
right, exactly. Like I see what you did there. Like
but yeah, so sometimes astrology can be literally right in your face like that, and that's why it's so cool, I feel like. And also, while like, yeah, like you might not necessarily if you don't know about these specific symbols and meanings of certain things, it'll be harder to like understand those. And that's why people that don't believe in it are just like, okay. But like once you actually like start like getting deep into your astrology knowledge, it's so much fun to like have these moments.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a great way to kind of be like, to just examine how these astrological symbols and like energies are manifesting like right in front of you, like in your everyday life.
Yeah. And it's always fun to learn just different levels of that, like certain things that planets rule, like even like your everyday stuff, like shoes or like whatever, like just learning that kind of level of it. Like when I read about stuff like that, I'm so fascinated. I'm not well versed in it yet, but I hope to be. Like it's just so cool.
Yeah. Okay,
We're
sorry.
really so nerdy about
I would say
astrology,
nerding
okay?
out on like astrology a little bit, but
All right, so let's actually just jump in and discuss the Taurus Scorpio axis. And Toni and I will take a second to like acknowledge where these signs fall in our chart and what planets we may have in these signs.
yeah.
So Toni can start us off.
Yes, your resident Taurus sun. Yeah, I have the sun in Taurus. I have Mars in Taurus, combust the sun, which basically means it's super close to the sun. The sun is burning my Mars up. And in Scorpio, I actually don't have any like significant planets, but it does fall in my ninth house. And I have a point there, which is called the Lot of Fortune. I'm not going to get into it too much, but it's basically like an ancient astrological technique that is calculated using like your sun, moon, rising, a little bit more complex than what we're talking about right now. But anyways, I have that in Scorpio in my ninth house. And then, yeah, my Mars and Sun in Taurus fall in my third house.
All right, and just to clarify, Toni is using whole house astrology.
Yeah.
She will be throughout the show, so I guess eventually we won't need to disclaim that. But we do differ, so I'll be using Placidus. So I have a Taurus moon, and the moon is exalted in Taurus, and we'll talk about that later. But yes, I have a Taurus moon, and Taurus rules, I believe, my third house. And then Scorpio rules my eighth house. And I don't have any significant placements there. There are, so I have my Chiron in my eighth house. And I also have Black Moon Lilith in my eighth house, which those are also like not really things that we're discussing this season, but maybe we will get into more in the upcoming seasons if you guys want to stay tuned. But for now, we'll get into more of the building blocks of the two.
Yeah.
So in the same way that we did for Aries and Libra, we're gonna just break down by like element, modality, ruler, and such, etc. And for each of them, and then we'll kind of put it together and see how that creates the sign that we're discussing.
Yeah, so starting off with Taurus, we have in the visual a little glyph underneath, which is just a symbol for Taurus. So we have a bull here. Element is earth, modality is fixed, it's ruled by Venus, and Mars has its detriment in Taurus, and the moon is exalted in Taurus, and it is a nocturnal sign. So those are the basic building blocks. I know it's kind of a lot to take in, but Silver and I are going to go into a little more in depth, like what these different building blocks mean to us in order to help give you all a vision of each of these signs.
All right, so here we have Scorpio. The little symbol under it is a scorpion. It's also the glyph of Scorpio. Scorpio is a water sign, so it's accompanied by Cancer and Pisces. It's a fixed modality. The ruler or its domicile is in Mars or Pluto. It's in detriment in Venus, and the moon falls in Scorpio. And it's a nocturnal as well.
Yeah, so that's Taurus and Scorpio. One thing I'll just add for Scorpio, I know Silver mentioned that the ruler is Mars or Pluto. So just to give a little bit of context, in traditional astrology or like Hellenistic astrology, Mars is the only ruler of Scorpio. It doesn't have an additional ruler, and that's the case for all of the signs. Like there's not a sign with 2 rulers because they don't acknowledge the outer planets, just the planets that are from like the sun to Saturn. Versus in modern astrology, the outer planets are incorporated, such as Pluto and Neptune and Uranus. And so in modern astrology, Pluto is considered a ruler of Scorpio. So cool. So that is Taurus and Scorpio. Yeah, it's kind of a lot to remember, but we're going to go through more in depth and break down like what all of these building blocks mean for us when in order to, you know, give a more full description of like how we view each of these signs. So let's start with Taurus.
Okay.
Cool. So the element, we're going to start with the element of it. So as a reminder, Taurus is an earth sign. Other earth signs include Virgo and Capricorn. I don't know, I went to my news anchor voice. Anyways, so what does earth mean to us? We wanted to, you know, dive into this element a little bit. So Silver, you want to start us off?
Yeah, so see, when I think of earth, I think of like the tangible stuff, the things you can touch, the things you can feel. I honestly think of just like the human experience in general on this earthly realm,
Mm-hmm.
um, like the practicality of being human, I guess, like the
Oh,
the
okay.
practical, tangible stuff. Um, for I would say for Taurus, it's more of the sensory aspects of it. And then when I think of Earth, I also can think of like, you know, like peaceful. I think of like nature. I think of the beauty of nature, and the like the power of the earth in general. You think of like earthquakes. Um, you think of kind of routine, I think. I don't know. Those are words that are coming to mind as I'm diving into Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Or what that would look like.
Yeah. Yeah, I have in my notes just like the material realm. Anything that's of this
Yeah,
physical
that's
material realm, you can touch, see, hear, taste, or hold. Like that, you
yeah.
can do that with that object. So,
Yeah, that's what I
um,
meant with in the human experience, like the sensory experience of being a human.
yeah. And I mean, when you were talking about the human experience, one thing that came to mind is just like the embodied experience. And I think that is also something that once we talk a little bit more about Taurus, we can get into. But I'm trying to think solely about like Earth, which would technically apply to all the Earth signs. I think of like stability. I think of pragmatism, tangibility, something of substance, something you can like it's like a little bit like realistic kind of like it's here. It's a little bit
Right.
more like
Exactly.
there's a presence to it for earth signs. I also thought about, I went on this like little learning tangent about earth. I did take a geology class in college, so that was cool to learn about earth too. But it's layered. The earth has a lot of layers in it, and at its
Yeah.
core, there's so many um different cycles that go on earth that help to support life and also like
Exactly.
give life to other organisms. Like earth is very cyclical, and I feel like when you said
Yeah.
routine, that's like what
Yeah,
I
that's
thought about.
exactly what I was about to say. When I said routine, I was literally thinking of like the Earth's rotation. Like that's what was
Mhm.
on like my mind when I thought that way. So like yeah, it's the cycles of Earth.
Right, and that's interesting because like I wasn't even thinking about like the earth itself. I was thinking about the life cycles within earth, like the water cycle and
Mhm.
the carbon cycle and the like environmental cycles and that kind of stuff, where it's like
Yeah.
you have all of these, it's like it's very systemic, like in a
Yeah.
Capricorn way. Like earth is like a system. And
Mhm.
another thing I thought about and I wanted to bring up is like the when we think about, well, there's two things. When we're thinking about earth and like it relating to our human experiences, our like the pragmatism of being human, you can't not talk about the body. And so I was thinking about how we tend to treat the earth and also how it's similar to how we tend to treat our bodies.
Mhm.
So earth is like, you know, the most disrespected person, the most disrespected being in the
Yeah.
and our earth is earth. Like
Yeah, and then connecting that back to the body, like
yeah,
just
like
like the like within capitalist systems and like just like that idea of like not prioritizing our bodies.
I have this really great quote from Sabrina Monarch that she's an astrologer that I think she's an evolutionary astrologer. But she talks about most of us live in an overculture that emphasizes a disconnection from Earth and therefore our bodies as well. Many of us move through the karmic patterns of living in an unsustainable way, overworking and overtaxing our bodies, overworking and overtaxing our environment. And that was just very poignant in terms of thinking about Earth and the ways that it's continually like its suffering just kind of goes unnoticed, I think. Or it's not that it goes unnoticed, but people just willfully don't care. I don't know.
Yeah. It's
um,
it's not unnoticed, it's just not
it's
prioritized,
not
I feel.
prioritized, even though it's literally giving us life. Like, so it's a very interesting way, but also to think about like how are we disconnected from our bodies and how do we overtax and overwork our bodies in a very similar way that it's not prioritized, but it's so vital. Like our bodies are vital for vitality. And then one other last tidbit about Earth I want to mention is so the other day I was like, thinking about Earth, and I was like, is there water inside of Earth? Like, I know the majority of Earth is water, like 70%.
Right.
Guess what? So are our bodies. Anyways, but I
Heaven
was like,
above.
is there water, right? Is there water inside the Earth's core? So I just decided to Google this, and there was like a bunch of stuff coming up. Like, this is apparently a very researched topic, but it is,
Oh.
scientists do speculate that there is water inside of Earth's core. And there's also a speculation that that actually might be what make like it was seeping out to make up Earth's bodies of water
Ocean.
that are on the surface. Um,
Oh, that's really
so that just made me think about how, listen to this, y'all. For each of the earth signs are opposite a water sign. And thinking about
Mhm.
that watery inside, like you have this earth that's like, you think of it as strong, stable. Like, I think that's why a lot of people take it for granted because it's just like, it's here, it's just a rock. Like, we just walking on it. Um,
Yeah.
but there's also like a watery inside. I think throughout this episode, I will definitely be mentioning a lot of connections between Earth and our bodies because I feel like they're just so glaringly there.
Mhm.
Um, cool.
It's
So
really cool, honestly.
moving on to modality of Taurus, this is a fixed sign, our first fixed sign in the zodiac. So I'll start off with what fixed means to me. So without trying to just in general, the fixed signs are like Aquarius, Leo, and Scorpio, the opposite of Taurus. And when I think of fixed signs, I think of like this stabilizing energy. It's very much about maintaining. It's like it comes after the cardinal sign. So it's like after the, seed has been planted, right? Like the fixed sign is just like, okay, how do we just maintain the growth? Like they're not really concerned with changing directions or switching things up. They just want to figure out how can you maximize and take advantage, like take as much as you can from this like present thing or like whatever you have going on. um, and I don't want it to seem like I think there's a tendency for fixed signs to get stuck, but I think fixed signs also, I've heard of fixed signs described as inert, which like I think is great for describing the fact that it's not like it's fixed signs are not are like lazy or they're not going to do things. It's like if they do it, they're just going to keep doing it. So it's like a fixed sign can have hella stamina because you can just keep going, keep going, keep going. They're not going to just change direction. So it's like they're not going to be good at running, a course that has a lot of twists and turns and stuff. But on that like one course, they are going to be on the course. Like they are
Mhm.
steadfast. And yeah, it's just about like maintaining.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that for me, those were a lot of, yeah, like my ideas of a fixed sign as well. For me, I said there is a comfort in what is known for them, and they don't often like to steer away from that just because they have the security of knowing that this is gonna get them where they want to get or whatever. Um, and I would say like not easily changed.
I would say
Um,
resistant.
resistant. Yeah, I said stubborn, but resistant sounds better. um, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess when you put fixed and earth together to make up our beautiful fixed sign Taurus, um, some of the things that come up for me, I feel like is like, okay, if you have something that's represented by a rock that is so solid, and then they're also fixed, like some might say this is the most fixed sign because it's just like you're already an earth sign and then you're also fixed. So it's like there's an added sort of layer, it seems, of like stability.
Mhm.
Whereas, some of the other earth signs, like they're worried about stability, but they're going to do it in a way that's a little bit more either initiatory, like a Capricorn, or they might be a little bit more adaptable, like a Virgo. A Taurus is not really interested in those things. Tauruses are going to be more interested in like the stability, like how can I like maintain the maintenance, like keep it like
Maintain maximum comfort and familiarity, I feel like.
yeah, let's bring Venus in there. So I think when Venus is expressed through Taurus, I feel like it's about maintaining pleasure, right? So we have this Venus word of pleasure, comfort, connection. And then we think about the fixed the fixed earth sign Taurus, and we get like this sign that is all about stabilizing pleasures, sustaining the body, connection to the body. So maybe with Libra, it was a little bit more, I think, connection to others. I think Taurus does care about that to a degree as well, but I think Taurus being an earth sign, being a fixed sign, is a little bit more about connection to maybe the land or the body, the earth and the body. And so being able to like nurture and nourish it and being like, if you think about how do you feel pleasure, like pleasure is different in Libra, I think, where it's like it's more of it's a feeling, but it's not a feeling. Like I feel like
Mhm.
Taurus is like in the body, like pleasure, like when you eat something that's really good, or when you orgasm, or when you like these things that like you can't quite intellectualize, like you just feel it.
You feel it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I think that, yeah, like talking about how we felt like for Earth, it was the human experience, the tangible stuff, the like sensory stuff. I feel like that also brings in the layer of like the pleasure that you get from all of your senses
Mhm.
specifically and by being like you said like in your body, so the pleasures of being a human I feel like are like
Yes.
very like Taurus Venusian, like eating good or like feeling really comfortable in certain like clothes or blankets
Mhm,
or
mhm.
like something that just like is beautiful to look at like art or like, but at the same time, I feel like when I think of a Taurus Venusian, I think it's very much like the beauty in the natural state of something,
Mhm.
in showing up like just like as you are, and finding beauty in that. Whereas I feel like with a Libra Venusian, it's more about the aesthetic or about like it looking pretty versus for Taurus, it being about like just the beauty that's like
That feels good.
that feels good. That's just like that just gives you that feeling. Yeah, which I like
Yeah.
love.
I think of it as like I think like Libra Venusians are about maybe mental connection when it comes to like Venus is always about connection in general, but I think Libra is about that mental connection, and I think Taurus is embodied connection. How can
Mhm.
like you be connected to your body, and because you're so connected to your body, also be able to connect to other bodies, but not necessarily in a way that's very like up here. It's more like that, like the core sort of just the earthy way of doing things. I don't know. It's like it's very like yeah, like sensual here.
And it's also hard to explain because it's like not verbalized. It's like the
Right.
feeling that you have. So I feel like that's also
Exactly.
why we like
And
like
it's a
tripping
good
up.
feeling. Like
And
Taurus,
I literally am just like rubbing my arms. Like
I
I'm like,
know, like I
no.
feel like that's the only way when you're trying to express like Taurus verbally, I feel like you have to have your body in motion and you have to like move a little bit because it's
You have
like
to feel it. Yeah.
yeah, it's like whatever feels good. Like, and I think that's what separates Taurus from Capricorn or Virgo. I think we're all concerned about our bodies and the embodied experience in some way, but Taurus is concerned about how can I make this as pleasurable and as sweet
Right.
and as like as possible. Like I want to
And
have
that's
the best experience.
exactly what Taurus is. And if anyone, like, I feel like that's not always perceived that way, but it's like Taurus will maximize their pleasure. If there's one thing about a Taurus or Taurus placement, is that their pleasure is a priority.
Yeah.
And that is like, I love that about them, but it can also be like, oh.
Yeah, we'll get into it. We'll get into it. And also
Yeah.
I just want to throw this in here. Our Taurus queen, Janet Jackson, love her for life. Pleasure principle, coming from a Taurus, like, come on. It's what we are about. It's the principle of pleasure. That's what
Mhm.
this is. Anyways, the moon. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about the moon, because the moon exalts in Taurus, and I think we should have our Taurus moon tell us about the moon and why you feel like it's important for Taurus.
Oh my gosh, this is fun because actually this connects back to what we were just discussing about Earth and how it's literally 70% water. And how, like, when you think about the Earth and you think about the ocean, for example, how it moves with like the moon, how it cycles with like the moon cycles. I feel like that makes sense that the moon is exalted in Taurus because it's like, it's an Earth sign.
The moon is also very much associated with our bodies. It's the closest thing out of all of the astrological bodies that we're talking about. The moon is the closest to humans, it's the closest to Earth. And that's why it gravitationally pulls the water. Like, and there's like, I saw this really awesome video on Twitter going around of like showing how
Yeah.
the moon is controlling the oceans. So I think what you're referencing here is like thinking about the moon as like something that's very close to us as and the human experience as well. And I think
Exactly. And our bodies as well, thinking about
yes,
like what,
exactly. And I
yeah.
think what's significant about the moon being exalted in this earth sign, like, it's at home in a water sign, but it's exalted in this earth sign. And I think that kind of tells a little bit about like there's some watery aspects to these earth signs and to Taurus, like especially when it comes to the connection part and the security part and the comfort and the
Mhm. The
nourishing and
comfort, and then exactly literally the words that I had next to moon was emotions, of course. And then comfort, mother, nurture. And I feel like those are all things that, like, I feel like nurturing is something that comes so naturally to Taurus placements. I think that Tauruses are very, like, I don't know, when I think of like my mom who's a Taurus sun, I think that my mom is like the most naturally nurturing person like ever. Like it just comes so intrinsically to her. And I don't know, maybe that's also a level of, like conditioning as a woman. But the moon is exalted in Taurus because I feel like that natural instinct of nurture
Mhm.
and of like comfort, like of also just being a comforting person or grounding person. Um and yeah, I don't know. I'm literally like, oh. I feel like it's so hard to really understand Taurus without also touching on the body and the senses and like those make up, I feel like, Tauruses, like and who they are and what they value. I also was thinking about in our first episode, you were talking about like when we had touched on things that we were proud of, and you talked about how you're proud of being able to be present and be in your body. And you were like, I feel like that's something that doesn't come naturally to everyone. I think that's why it's something I'm very proud of. And it's definitely not. Like I think it's really hard to be in your body, especially when thinking about how um, this is something I read about often is like how our body stores our trauma and how a lot of the times, like, we might not be consciously aware of things that are triggering for us, but our body always will be, and our
Mhm.
body will always react in ways. And it's always important to understand like the physiological um like feelings that you get, I guess, physiological symptoms that you get in order to like really understand what you're feeling. And I feel like that's like, I don't even know, like a lot of that is kind of connecting back to the moon too, of like what you're
Mhm.
feeling and like the body. And
Yes, yes.
it's always, yeah, it's something that I find really like intriguing. And there's like a lot of like therapists that do like somatic therapy and like in releasing that like that stuff from your body in order to actually be able to be in your body and be present and
Yes.
experience life in that like pleasurable way that for Tauruses may come easily. Not to say that they don't store their trauma, of course, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think what you're touching on is such a great segue into Scorpio because it's like you can't ever, just like you can't ever disconnect water from the earth, like water is takes up so much of the earth, you cannot ever disconnect your feelings from your body. And your
Exactly.
emotions are a part of your body. They're also impacting each other. They're in this sort of oppositional, not oppositional, but they're in a conversation that might be engaged between a Taurus and a Scorpio. So I think let's move into Scorpio.
Yeah.
Let's move into the element of Scorpio, water. So when it comes to water, I think of water as all encompassing. I think it is like it can literally consume you.
Yeah.
um, and it carries you. If you surrender to it, it will carry you. You will float. I think about the fact that your body is so much lighter in water. Like you're not really walking like you're on stable ground. You're kind of being carried and transported, and you kind of like are limited in what you can do. Like you can only move in slow motion when you're in it. But then I also think about what it provides. It supports life. You cannot go like more than 3 days without water. You can go like a long ass time without food. But when it comes to water, you need that shit like every day. um, so yeah, I think water makes me think of like this life sustaining, supporting. There's so much life in the water in our oceans, very deep, unknown. There's a lot we don't like.
Right.
There's so many new species coming
Right.
out of the water all the time, literally like way less explored than space. So like
Right.
shit has depths. And I think it's like I was looking at like the different deep points of water the other night. And it said like if you go to the deepest point or like one of the deepest points, like the depth is not as tall as Mount Kilimanjaro. So like the
Yeah.
water, like the depths of the ocean, that's some deep shit. Like
Yeah.
that's not like it's like probably more than what any of us could really imagine.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's my spiel on water for now.
Okay, so for mine, I was thinking when I think of water, I think of yeah, depth. I think of depth in terms of like physical depth, but also like, like a more symbolic depth. I think power, I think strength. Um, when you think of like a tsunami, like what that can do, how that can like affect um the world and everyone. I feel like when I was thinking of a lot of these, I was thinking of the ways that these elements can be destructive and the ways that they can like at their truest like or at their highest power.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
that's why I did a lot of natural disasters, clearly. So yeah, depth, power, strength. I said calm, like in the way of you saying like if you surrender, but then I also said unrest.
Mm,
Because like you can have both with the ocean. You never know what you're getting.
yeah.
um and like you said, like I said, for me, like symbolically, like it's like a knowledge, it's like an inner knowing. I feel like the idea of like just like also what you could find out, it's like it symbolizes knowledge for me in that way, like of like what there is to learn, how there's always so much more to learn. But also like I feel like when I don't know, when I like go to the beach and stuff, I just feel like the ocean knows things. And she tries to tell me
Memory.
in her ways. And it, you know, of course, like the oceans can be representative of emotions, but also I don't know, like it's also a place where you can go to release those emotions. And that's definitely my relationship with the ocean. I cry every time I go to the ocean. Okay. I cry everywhere all the time. And then you said, I don't remember, it was one word that you said.
Was it all encompassing? I don't know.
Oh yeah, maybe it was that one. It was like a word, and the way you said it was a lot like more positive, but for me I said overwhelmed.
Oh, okay.
Like overwhelming, because there's so much of it and it's like everywhere, it's all encompassing like you said, but at the same time, like when I try to wrap my head around the ocean, it's
Yeah.
like
And I feel like
overwhelming.
it kind of goes back to like the idea, if it's so deep, it's so like wide, like there's just so much to take in, and I don't think it's something we could really imagine. It's almost like space. So now that we've talked about water, let's talk about, well, we'd already talked about being fixed as an earth sign. One thing I will say for fixed water, I know we're talking about, we've already mentioned some keywords for water as an element on its own. And so when we think about fixed water, that makes me just think about like dwelling and like sitting with, and like, because fixed signs are not going to really change direction. They're really more about like maintaining and stabilizing. I think it's like, how do you do that in the emotional realm? You have to sit with them. You have to, you know, tend to them and help to maintain the, like, I think emotional security, which I think Scorpio is very much about as a fixed water sign. And then one thing I wanted to mention is a metaphor from Diana Rose Harper, an astrologer. She talks about fixed water in Scorpio as a well, and how like when you have like an ocean, right, and you poison an ocean, or like you put something in the ocean, it can kind of like, it'll impact parts of the ocean, but it can kind of, the rest of the ocean is massive enough to like filtrate it and get it out, right? But when you have a well, because it's contained water, like a fixed water sign, you know, if you put something in there that's poisonous or harmful to it, it's gonna impact the whole environment. Like there's nowhere else for the water to go. And so she brings it up as a way to say, like, that's why Scorpios are so protective. That's why water, fixed water, has to be protective of what it allows in that water element, because, and I mean, in that environment, because it's so like susceptible to being kind of poisoned. Yeah, so I feel like that really speaks to, that's like a good metaphor to kind of imagine what it means to be fixed water. And I think as we continue the conversation, we'll both kind of get into more like how that comes to life for Scorpios for us. But the last thing we'll get into is Scorpio's ruler, Mars. So, Silver, you know, what do you have to say about Mars in
Well,
terms of
we did
water?
touch exactly. Like Mars shows up differently in this placement. So I would say it's still, you know, the planet of aggression, of passion. Um, but in terms of Martian fixed water, while it's not water, hear me out. Mhm. I would say I would compare it to a volcano. Um, like I feel like the way that it like comes out, and it's not like it's like different than the Aries Martian energy of like the destructive fire. I feel like with Scorpio, it's more of a slow, sneaky. Um, I mean, when I think about after the eruption, right? Because you know that part's gonna be seen, it's gonna be heard, we're gonna know. But then after, as it's like coming down, it's more like I don't know, and it's like it's a liquid. So for some reason, that's like what comes
So
to
the
mind when I think
magma,
of
you're thinking about magma.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, okay. So like that's what I think about in terms of like the way that Mars kind of comes out for Scorpio versus like an aggressive fire, explosive fire of Aries.
Mm.
Um like just like the sneaky, like, yeah, so that kind of vibe. But I would say it still has that aggression, you know, because like a volcano still has that aggression, that power. um but I think it is less in your face. I feel like the Scorpio Mars is less in your face than an Aries Mars. It can be, but it takes a little bit more to get them there than I feel like for an Aries.
Okay, yeah.
What is your difference in association with the Scorpio Mars?
So I think of like a water warrior. I think of like, again, because we're dealing with the emotional realm, I think what's going to drive a Scorpio Mars is going to be a little bit different than what drives an Aries Mars. So like it's going to be things that impact your emotions, or like things that sort of trigger you in a way that I think is a little bit different. Like I feel like the triggering that Aries experiences is a little bit more in the moment, like pop off. And it's because it's like, you're threatening me. You're threatening me. That is Aries, right? But I think Scorpio feels the same thing, but it's more like, you're threatening my emotions. You're threatening like my um vulnerability, my inner child, my like there's the things that you are gonna hit on to bring a Scorpio to that point. Is gonna be, it's gonna be more of an emotional experience of like, okay, now I need to battle you because you have come into battle with my, you come across the walls, you come into my territory, like now you're done. But the
You've
thing
crossed
about
the line
Scorpio,
of like my emotions, my vulnerability, my heart.
right, right, exactly. The thing about Scorpio, which is why, you know, and this is like a fun little Scorpio versus Aries, who's gonna win in a fight. Like Aries, if they get the first punch, they're gonna win. Aries in the moment, they can, the amount of like force that they have in the moment. But the thing about them is that's the only time they have it. They only have it in the moment. Scorpio is the long game because
Because you
Scorpios
come,
are
that's when
fixed.
you bring in the fixed energy.
Right,
Mhm.
exactly.
The endurance.
One thing that a fixed sign is going to do, they are going to be thorough. They are going to destroy you. If you're a Mars, if
They
you're
are
Mars,
going to destroy you. Got
yeah,
it?
like, and they're committed to it. There's nothing more important to them. They are obsessed almost with destroying you if you have done something
Cross that line.
that has crossed the line for them. And so I think a Scorpio would win if Aries swings and the Scorpio happens to duck, then the Scorpio is gonna beat them down. Like it's gonna be a beat down, and it's gonna be, you know, sad for Aries, but happy for Mars. I mean, for Scorpio. So yeah, I think that's the difference. I think Mars and Scorpio is much more precise, much more calculated, because they are sitting with it for a long time, and they're like, it's not like Aries. Aries, I think, is just like shoot, 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 like, and they're probably gonna hit a lot of people. A Scorpio is more like a sniper, like hidden, and like
Yeah,
has that direct shot and has literally focused on the
definitely.
shot and has like a zoomed in thing, and they're gonna like attack.
Yeah, I feel like just in general, Scorpios are a lot more, and it like the like it's probably the fixed energy, and it's also the water energy of being sensitive, but like they are so like they know you before you think they know you. Like they're so observant, they notice the slightest changes in your behavior or whatever, and so they like study you
Mhm.
before they bring you down. So I
Yeah,
feel like that, and it's
exactly.
and whereas like you said with Aries, it's like impulsive. It's not thought out. It's not
Right, it's
that
not.
same.
It's about the
So
moment.
like
And that's why
exactly.
with
And
Aries,
Scorpio is
like,
calculating. Like they
right,
are on it before way before you even know you fucked them over. Like
right, exactly. And that's like the thing with Aries, is like, because they're in the moment, once that moment's done, it's done. Like they're not, Aries don't really hold on to stuff too much.
exactly.
But a Scorpio, because of that fixed nature of a Scorpio, once it's done, it's never over. It ain't never
Once
over.
it's done, it's just begun. Like
Right? Like literally, it ain't
no,
never
that's
over.
so true. Because when I was also like just like when we were talking about it last time, how you described, the cardinality of the fire as burnout. Like they have it at the beginning, but they are not sustaining. They're not like sustaining that. And Scorpio as a fixed sign can sustain that, and they will.
And they
And
have the
after
emotional depth and
capacity,
backing to
yeah,
like force it even more. Like,
yeah.
so yeah, don't mess with a Scorpio, I guess, is the conclusion. I don't know. Um, don't hurt their feelings. So yeah, that's a little bit more about the building blocks that make up Scorpio and Taurus. Now, the next thing I think we want to talk about, and we might not have like too much more to add here, but just to leave the space for it. Is there any like other sort of key phrases around what Taurus represents to you that you didn't really get to touch on before that you feel like is helpful for the conversation about the axis?
Yeah, we talked about it, comfort, security, material wealth. I said obtaining things.
You didn't
And I
talk about the
said
things, the having.
exactly, yes.
One thing we didn't, I think it's important to talk about the possession, right? Because we mentioned a lot of about like being embodied as a like and that having, you know, representations for Taurus, but Taurus is also about possessions and having things. And I think that that also comes back to the material realm, like this idea that like through your resources, one, having things is a way to continue to support your body in case of like having food or having money to buy food. So that's like one way to look at it for Taurus. Like you need to have these things so that way you can continue to maintain and stabilize and nurture yourself. And I think that another thing that the possessions help with for Taurus is this feeling or this I think attachment, because I think all fixed signs have attachment issues, but Taurus as a fixed earth sign, attachment to material possessions to feel secure. Like it's like almost like now they are a part of the body. Like you, everything that you have now in order to continue to feel like you're stable in your environment, like those possessions are just as important as your body. What I'm trying to say is just like possessions are very important for Tauruses, I think.
Yeah.
Almost too important, and we can get into that. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on possessions?
Yes, I think that the Venusian aspect of that makes it kind of like, I think that something that Tauruses might struggle with. I feel like there can be a level of like a false sense of security that they
Mm-hmm.
get with these possessions. And
Mm-hmm.
then when they don't have that security within themselves, they tend to believe that those possessions will bring them that security. And so they can
Mm-hmm.
become gluttonous or just like, like just wanting
Greedy.
more and more, despite the fact that it's not filling the void that they're trying to fill.
Oh, period. Cleared them. Anyways. So yeah, and then I think that yeah, I said maximizing pleasure. Taurus is just about that good time, like not the good time that maybe a fire or air sign would bring in terms of like socially fun, all that kind of stuff. It's that good time that feels good in your, like you just feel it and you
In
feel.
your what tone?
I don't even know because I'm like I don't know where it's at. Like it's in
In
my
your
body,
body.
but I feel like it's also my soul. Like I don't know.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I feel like to them it's literally the same. Like I feel like that, I mean that feeling, like that feeling of in your body is also bringing them that same like that feeling of joy or
yeah, like
pleasure.
and I'm
Like it doesn't have to be like luxury necessarily or like these like nice things. Like it could also
right,
be just
yeah.
the comfort of being at home with someone you love and just like enjoying each other's presence or the feeling that that makes like how that makes you feel. Just like I don't know, there's this
Yeah.
I feel like people often associate them with luxury and nice things and of course Tauruses love them some of that too. But it's also just like comfort. It's security.
Right.
Like they value
Right.
that
They're
just
never
as much
gonna
as things.
you're never gonna catch a tourist out here like if they're into luxury, it's not gonna be luxury that makes them uncomfortable. That's gonna be okay.
Exactly.
It has to if it's gonna be luxury, it has to be comfortable. Um
Hmm.
and so I
She
think
comfortable.
a cultural reference I want to bring up. This is inspired by the astrologer Michael J. Morris. They brought this up in an episode of the Strology show, and I feel like wow, it just felt I had already read this piece that they brought up before this, but I like when they put it in the context of thinking about Taurus through this article, I was like, OMG, this is literally the Taurus Bible. Okay, so it's from Audre Lorde, our fellow Taurus moon. And it's an excerpt from Uses of the Erotic. So I'll start off.
Like, okay, pause. Let's take a second to acknowledge the fact that that's the name of her book, and it's about pleasure. And like, I mean, there's like eroticism and pleasure interchangeable. So the
Yes,
fact that she's
yes.
Taurus moon, I was like,
It's perfect. And the whole argument is about thinking about the erotic, not only in a sexual way, like in the sexual way, but also in the other ways that it manifests. So let me give you the 101, like that. The excerpt.
the lowdown, if you will.
Right. For the erotic is not a question only of what we do. It is a question of how acutely and fully we can feel in the doing. Once we know the extent to which we are capable of feeling that sense of satisfaction and completion, we can then observe which of our various life endeavors brings us closest to that fullness.
That fullness.
That fullness. Like, I feel like this.
And I feel like that's that feeling that we keep trying to describe is like
Yes,
that, like the fullness.
The satisfaction and the completion. And throughout it she talks about like the different activities that can bring that to her. Like, yes, it could be sex, but it could
Yeah.
be writing, it could be
Yeah.
reading a really good novel, it could be cooking, it could be just being with my friends. Like, it could be so many different things, but like everybody knows that complete satisfaction is it's like orgasms, like
Yeah.
like it's that
it's like orgasm.
everybody knows about those. um, so yeah, I felt like that was a great just a great excerpt to describe Taurus. Another thing I'll bring up is a line from a Frank Ocean song, who is a Scorpio. So we have our Scorpio person telling us about the Taurus experience. And it's from Sweet Life. And I think first of all, when he sings this, it literally makes me feel these things. Like, I just feel like, wow, this is such a great, like, music is a huge, part of Taurus, I think, in the arts, just being a Venus sign. And so, but especially music that gives you that complete satisfaction. So anyways, keeping it surreal, whatever you like, whatever feels good, whatever takes your mountain high. Like, this is what it means to be a Taurus. And I think it's important that this song, in a lot of ways, I think it's about basking in the pleasure, but I think some of it is about like calling out like, this is a little too good. Like, this is too good to be true. Surreal. That doesn't mean real. That just means that this is just a image, sort of, or like it has all the things that make it seem just pleasurable, but not necessarily realistic. And I think when you bring up like the fake security, like, because they're not addressing the core of what might be an issue, whether it's like a lack of a lack of security, feeling insecure or whatever, I think that they can start to construct or try to possess things in order to build a world that gives off a sense of pleasure and comfort, but it's not really the kind of comfort that's going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
The way that they want it to be. So I think that is kind of getting into the shadow sides of like when Tauruses haven't really addressed the root of an issue. I think it can become controlling, it can become possessive, it can become stubborn, it can become like this thing of like, no, I just need to do it this way so I can get this, fifth, that, and the third, but nothing's really changing for you because you're not able to sit with the unpleasurable things. You need to develop a sort of capacity to deal with unpleasurable things. That's like the hardest thing for Tauruses. I don't
I
like
literally felt how hard that was for you to even say out loud.
no, literally. And it's like when you're Venusian, I think you just want everything to be right. And I think for Taurus, it's just like, but why can't I just control everything to make it this most pleasurable experience? And it's like, one, you need to expand your understanding of pleasure. Is it really pleasurable if there's so much discomfort that you're burying and like not addressing? Or is it just like the illusion, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. For like some quotes that I had seen that reminded me of Taurus. This was actually really funny. So this was a quote from a dancer. She's like a ballet dancer. Like she's an older woman now, but she's actually her son is in Taurus, and this is something that she said. She said, "The body is a sacred garment. The body is an instrument to dance. But your art is outside that creature. The body never lies. The body says what words cannot." And like that's just so funny to me. Like first of all, like her being an artist and being a dancer as a Taurus, and like specifically saying all these things about what the body is for her, and how, and like that's like the same idea of like, yeah, your body, like the body never lies. There's like this book called
The body keeps the
what's the,
score.
yeah, the body keeps score, and just knowing that like your body keeps track of everything that happens in your life, and like
Right.
and she's like, the body can't lie.
Yeah, and as you're saying it, I'm like, the Scorpio stuff is so present as we're talking about it. I want to
Right.
go out on a limb and say, I think I've mentioned this to you before, Silver, but like, I really feel like the Taurus Scorpio axis is like, they're like so connected. Like they feel
Yeah.
so like there's a magnetism there that I feel like, I mean, I think it exists throughout the axes, but something about the Taurus Scorpio axis is like, I don't know if the other sister signs really have that much of a connection the way that Taurus and Scorpio do. Like it seems so, I mean, it's sexual just because they're sexual signs, but like it seems like wow, there's a lot of energy.
Literally, yeah. And like I remember this like conversation is also what propelled this idea for our season. So, and I remember feeling like this after we had our discussion the first time. Like we were just like, whoa, like our minds were blown just because of how similar they were, and how that was not something that, I mean, I had considered before. And I'm looking at my original notes from like months ago from when we had this conversation, and I said one of my favorite axes because of their similarities. Like, and I just like
Yeah.
was so like, after like writing out everything, I was so like intrigued by that axis specifically, and also just talking about like the body, and you saying like sexual, you know, like how like Scorpio rules the sexual organs, and like then there's like the pleasure of like Taurus, and like I don't even know, like, and that being in your body, and that also being a place where you can store a lot of trauma, and like just
Mm.
like so much of these like connections, and I'm just like, yeah, y'all are
There's something
similar.
there. There's something there. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we've talked more about what Taurus means to us. Let's give Scorpio some time to shine. I was thinking about the Scorpio environment, and I was kind of imagining it as literally like the bottom of the ocean. So like it's dark. And so Mars having a home here is it's moving different than Aries in a lot of ways, which we've already mentioned, but like it has to, I think its sensory level is also pretty heightened, not in terms of like the physical senses, but the internal senses. So that intuition, you know,
Intuition,
with
yes.
Scorpio, because you have to kind of, when you're dark in the depths of the ocean, imagine, and you have to like be able to protect your internal emotional environment, you have to intuit. Like you have to, you can't do it. You
Yeah,
can't rely on your eyes. You have to feel it and you have to like have a like feel drawn to it. Anyways,
right. I love that like description of it being, of you comparing it to the bottom of the ocean, like that like darkness, that shadowy like part,
right.
and the part that's so unknown and that they don't allow people to see, and like, yeah.
Yeah.
Very Scorpio.
But I've been thinking a lot about Scorpio babies because when it comes to some of these signs, there are so many like prevalent stereotypes to the point where you would think that a Scorpio baby just comes out with a knife. Like
And they do. My two older sisters are proof. I'm just kidding.
like, and they come out with the capacity to have a knife, right? But they're still babies, right? And so I was writing something and I'm going to try to sift through it. But when, Scorpio babies come into this world, much like everyone else, they're innocent. They're getting to know the world for the first time. They're untouched. They're just now exploring. The difference is that a Scorpio baby is getting to know the world through this environment that has the capacity to basically hold space for such a depth of emotions, and whether they're positive or negative, it doesn't matter. It's just emotions in general. And so they have a capacity to hold space for that. It's not to say that they come out like, you know, sad or like they come out untouched, but then shit happens to them just like shit happens to everybody, right? And once shit happens to them, like as they're moving throughout the world, they can hold space for deeper stuff than some people, other people. Like other people might not be able to hold space for as much as they can. Having the capacity to hold space for tough shit is a very important and delicate sort of task. And I think Scorpios are willing to do that. They have the will to deal with the tough shit.
Right. And just from what I've experienced of Scorpios, they often like unconsensually are kind of exposed to a lot more than they probably would want to be or whatever at a younger age. And I feel like often that goes unseen or unheard of. And it's not
Well,
until
it's not even like unseen sounds too passive. Oftentimes people look away. Like people
oh my
will
god, yeah.
ignore they will ignore, the depths of the pain and whatever, especially the uncomfy feelings. I think society is Venusian in the way that we only want to do what feels good. If it feels bad, like even if it's important to process it, we don't want to because we'd rather, look away, hide it, ignore it.
Yeah.
Scorpios, and because they're holding space for it, society looks away from Scorpios because it's like, how dare you give this negative feeling any sort of attention?
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like because like you said, they do have the will to hold space for those heavy emotions. Often I feel like people kind of overlook them in a way of being like, well, then they can handle it. Like if
Mm,
they do have the capacity of it, like if they've lived through this already, then they're good. Like they'll be fine or whatever. And it's yeah, I feel like when you say things like that they're kind of just like overlooked because of that. It's very true. And I feel like that's
right,
a lot of Scorpios in my life that I know, like, that's very true for them. And that
right.
makes
And
me
it's
so
almost like
sad.
it's
And they're
not
literally little freaking teddy bears, honestly. They're
right.
literally little
Yeah,
babies.
when you mention them being like teddy bears, it's like, what do you think they're trying to protect, right? Like there's a lot of like sensitive like topics and the stuff that society has just kind of overlooked, they're holding space for, and they're trying to protect that because they know that probably from experience, when they have let people in, people don't typically, they're a little put off by what they're seeing or what they're hearing because they're not sort of they're conditioned to look away from pain and look away from, the harder truths to hold around what it means to be alive. So it's like the Martian in the Scorpio is like, all right, I'm going to do what I need to do to protect this very delicate matter that y'all are not ready to discuss because y'all just want to ignore it. And since y'all want to ignore it, I'm not going to let you see it until I feel safe and know for sure that you're going to be, you know, you're going to be able to handle what I'm about to tell you. Like,
Yeah, but at the same time, I feel like while it is like it's obviously a defense mechanism and a protective like a way to protect themselves, I feel like that can be so harmful to them as well as like holding in that like traumatic stuff. Like as humans, once again, relating this back to like the Aries idea, like we all need people. And I feel like that's so Martian, is thinking like, okay, I'll be fine on my own, maybe. Um, but like, like at the end of the day, like it's always, especially Scorpio's emotional asses, like it's always necessary to have someone there for you and like in support of you. And I understand the selective nature of them, but I feel like something that they could learn and grow like from are these experiences, and also learning to trust. And like that's like the risk of trust in general, because that is what it is, it's a risk. And like you they're just not willing to be wrong. I feel like when it comes, like they're not willing to be wrong in terms of trust, and I understand that it's from their experiences, and I get them, and I really like, I love me a Scorpio as well. But I feel like that's what it is. Like you have to be willing to get hurt, and they're just not.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, when you think about fixed water, it's like, because if they get hurt, they're gonna get hurt. Like, and I'm not trying to say like they get more, like, I mean, occasionally worse things do happen to Scorpios. I do think that's a thing because Mars is present, and Mars is not gonna give you like, glorious beneficial things, right? But also, I think the fixed nature of Scorpio is like dwelling in it. Like if something bad happens, it's like they're like sort of consumed by it. There's nowhere else for the
Yeah.
bad to kind of go. It's kind of just like, you know, and at that point it starts to become a problem for themselves. That's why I feel like Scorpios kind of need to learn how to, and I think they're here to learn how to heal and how to figure out ways to clear different things. And I think that's where the transformation comes in for me, at least, because I feel like it's not like a transformation that happens overnight. I think it's a slow process of like, I've sat with these uncomfortable emotions. I've sat with this discomfort and emotional turmoil for so long that I had no choice but to figure out how to heal from it and transform my pain into something that gives me a better life experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great segue into the axis, because I think both struggle with similar things, and I think both Taurus and Scorpio have the different perspectives to help each other heal and transform.
Yeah. Ooh, Scorpio, that energy is heavy. I feel like
It's
even in
heavy, and
talking
it's
about
and
it,
it's supposed to be. And the thing is, to me, we cannot talk about Scorpio without bringing up
holding
society's
space for
inability to hold space for
heaviness, for
heaviness,
discomfort.
discomfort. Yes. And I think that is like that's what makes Scorpio so misunderstood. If we were a different kind of society that was like had a much healthier relationship to discomfort, I don't know if all of these stereotypes that we have for Scorpio like would really exist, because they would
Yeah.
be a little bit more, palatable for society. But Scorpios have a huge burden in terms of like they come out so soft and squishy, and they're trying to experience the world with their deep asses, and then they realize like, damn, like everybody else is ashamed, everybody else is afraid. So now, because everybody else is afraid, I have to adjust how I act and interact with the world,
Mhm.
so that way I don't scare all the people off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And that's why, like, I feel like there's often, like, people often are like, oh my God, Scorpios are so intense. And some people will say it in a bad way. I love it. I love the intensity of them. And I feel like they're just real, and they're not gonna, like, in some ways, they're not gonna withhold how they feel to make it more digestible for you.
Mm-hmm,
Uh,
mm-hmm.
but when it comes to their own like things and their own vulnerabilities, that's another story. They will withhold that shit.
Yeah.
But moving into the Taurus Scorpio axis, I was just thinking about how the axes are, like a symbiotic relationship, and that's kind of our point in this season is to like explain that and how without one there's not another and they benefit from each other. So for this one I was saying like how Taurus is comfort and Scorpio is discomfort, and I thought it would be good to start off with that one because we were just talking about how literally you're like Scorpios are just uncomfortable. Like
Yeah, and
and like
I didn't mean
or
that.
no, like the society is uncomfortable by or
Yeah,
put off by Scorpio.
exactly. You know, what brought this conversation up was your sister feeling like Tauruses get away with a lot, but they be acting just like Scorpios, right? And I saw that same perspective from another Scorpio. So I wanted to address the fact that I see why a Scorpio might feel this way, because I think if you're a Scorpio, you've made everyone uncomfortable with your just by having deep emotions, like not really by virtue of anything wrong that you've done, more so because society can't deal with it. Versus, I think Taurus's interaction with society is much more pleasant. I think Tauruses have a much more generative relationship where it's like I think the Venusian aspect of them makes them be perceived as like
Palatable.
palatable, accepting. And it's like, so I could see why Scorpio might feel like, oh, you know, why do they get to be accepted and like not be like, you know, ignored or whatever in the same way that I am. I'm just here feeling shit. Like
Yeah, I feel like for a Scorpio, it's like we're doing the same things, which is so funny because when my friend was talking, I mean, when my sister was talking about it, she was talking about how like she feels like Tauruses are fake and stuff. And like I don't necessarily agree with that statement, but I can see why she would see it that way, given that like Scorpio is doing what they're doing, but they're like Taurus is doing it in a Venusian way. So it just
right,
is
like
like
they're both
palatable, like you said. And then for her, it's like you're just not being real. But like maybe for them it is real. And for
right.
Scorpio, that would just be so not real. So they
Exactly.
like I feel like that's why she like has this beef with Taurus basically now.
When we think about the ways that they're doing the same thing, I want to be clear. I think the same things that they're doing is this security. What my phrase for, Taurus and Scorpio was like body and soul. Taurus being body, Scorpio being soul. And I think another thing that came up was body and emotions, but they're so inseparable. And I think that when it comes to what Taurus and Scorpio are both trying to do, they're both trying to keep those things secure. So, and keeping those things secure require, tending to both like you can't just care for the body without caring for the soul. Can't care for the soul without caring for the body. That's what I'm trying to say. You have to care for both at the same time. They might be prioritizing one over the other, but at the end of the day, they're linked. And so Scorpio sees Taurus doing different things in order to try to preserve their body and also their emotions. And they see them moving about the world in this Venusian way. Which is the same thing
That
they're
might
doing,
be
but
superficial to them,
right. And
maybe.
it might seem superficial, but like ultimately they see, I think, you're like, you're just worried about feeling secure. Me too. And I think that's what Scorpio and Taurus need to realize. Hey, we both want to feel secure. We just
Exactly.
want to feel safe here. Like, but I think the reaction to a Scorpio trying to feel safe is much different than the reaction to a Taurus trying to feel safe. And I think that's what your sister and other Scorpios are pointing out.
Yeah, definitely. Which also brings me to a quote by Carol by Bronx's Fine Ass. Hit me up if you ever listen to this podcast. So they tweeted and they said, like, in order to get Taurus, comfort, stability, high self-worth, we must first go through Scorpio, release, inner transformation, turmoil, and discomfort. Scorpio is death, while Taurus is the rebirth. And I feel like often we associate, with Scorpio transformation, we say death and rebirth, but I feel like that, that was a different perspective on Taurus actually being the rebirth, and like that sense of, like comfort within your body and within this earthly realm after you do the work, the inner
Right.
healing
The
that
soul
required
work.
to get there. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think they both provide very important lessons around healing.
Yeah.
Physical healing and emotional healing and soul healing, those are all things that cannot be separated from one another. And they're both, you know, they're both teaching lessons on that for sure.
Yeah.
I said that they're both also teaching the importance of protecting our most tender parts. I think Taurus is also very protective, not in a Martian way, but they're still protective in the sense that they're going to do everything they can to ensure that their bodily experience is pleasurable for them. And so, in doing that, that means you have to block out shit that's not pleasurable. If you want to keep feeling good, you have to reject the bad. And that's where they're protective over their good, like they're protective over their good space, their tender space. And I think that Scorpios are very similar in the sense that maybe what they're protecting might not be quite as feel good, but it's theirs and it's something that's important to them. So they're not going to let you in right away to see. And
Exactly.
I think
It's
Taurus and
just a
Scorpio
slow burn with Scorpio, though. It's not like they won't. They just want to see that you're going to stick around
right.
in the first place.
And I think that's where the similarity comes for Tauruses too. Like I think they can be very similarly private. Scorpios are a little bit more in your.
Definitely.
I think Scorpios are more like stay out of my business private, like none of your business. I think Tauruses are more, they're going to be Venusian about it. So they're going to just reveal what needs to be revealed, but they really won't let you in. Like as a Taurus sun, I think I'm queen of like, you ask me a question, I can make you really feel like I gave you such an in-depth answer. Like that shit, like, and maybe that could come off as fake. I think that's the fakeness for where Scorpio might say,
Yeah.
like I will reveal, I'm very selective in what I reveal. And I think
Yeah.
Scorpios are similar, but I think it's in a more no bullshit way, whereas Tauruses might do it in a way that makes you think you're in a little bit, but you probably aren't really in.
Yeah. As a Taurus moon, I can very much relate to that. I think that I am very selective about the information that I, like distribute to people in my life or whatever. But at the same time, like I'm sure they would be like, oh, I know this person so well. And I'm like,
Exactly.
yeah. Like
And I feel like Scorpios, I mean, I think they can do that to an extent, but they probably won't even give you really the time of day until you
no, like
reach
Scorpios
that
won't even
moment.
pretend to tell you
Yeah.
something. Like that's the thing. It's like I feel like Taurus do it and then they're like they still continue to test the waters. Scorpios need to test the waters and vet you completely before they even give you like even a tinge of information about
Right.
themselves.
Like they're not going to tell you anything really until they tell you everything. And
Exactly. And then when you're in, you're in, you're locked in, you're not
you're
going
locked in,
anywhere.
you can't leave. Now you're in the bottom of the ocean with them and you got to
Exactly. And if
stay.
you leave, they will find you.
I saw this one thing that said Tauruses are more possessive and Scorpios are more obsessive. And I feel
Mm,
like that was a very good way to view them doing similar things but in different ways, right? So like
definitely.
Tauruses are gonna they want to have you, like they want you like
They want to add you to their fucking
leave.
little box of possessions in the back.
Oh yeah, that too. Like and honestly, I feel like like once you're in relationship with them, they can tend to be, I think, a little bit possessive in the sense that they're like, you're my friend. That's my mom. That's my brother. That's like mine. You know how babies go through that phase.
Mine.
Right. Babies go through that phase where anything they pick up is theirs. Like that's Taurus.
Mhm.
That's the Taurus baby because Tauruses are earlier in the zodiac.
Yeah,
Um,
toddler age.
yeah, toddler age. So that's the possessive part. And I think Scorpios are obsessive in the sense that, like, I think it's a much more psychological thing of like, because you are mine, like, I need to know everything about you. I need to know where you're at. I need to know where you're going. I need to know, like, I think a Scorpio might be more in their obsessiveness, a little bit more like focused and
Yeah,
like there's a
Scorpios give
level
a
of
fuck about you as a person, and if anyone is near you, if anyone does you wrong in the slightest, they will care just as much as they will care about themselves.
right.
And I
And I
feel like
think
Taurus are loyal in a similar way, but I don't think that they do it for the person. I think they do it for themselves.
Yeah, I think that like their loyalty is about, I think, pragmatically, why would I let anyone threaten my possession? Like, because you have Taurus coming at it from a more pragmatic sense and a Scorpio coming at it, they're water signs. Like, it's a much more intense sort of like bond that's like this water connection obsession. But the Taurus archetype is not necessarily conducive, I think, for intense emotional obsession. And that's my hot take.
Yeah, yeah. Because earth signs in general are like that. I feel like they don't have that same
Like they have
at
it.
the same time.
They
It's
have
that's
it.
what's crazy. Is that like there's a sign in Scorpio, so I think they do. They just choose
No,
not to.
I'm not trying to say earth signs don't have emotions. Let me let net
So earth
let
signs
that
don't
take.
have emotions. You heard it here, folks.
No, literally, but it's more so that I think earth signs are probably prioritizing the body and the material realm a little bit more than the emotional one. But their sister sign is always there to remind them, like, until you really deal with that emotional realm, you're not going to be able to have the ultimate physical experience, right? And so that's why I think for Tauruses, obsession might not, that's not necessarily the word that I would use for a Taurus right away. It's there, it's possible, but I think much more possessive. Like, what can I have? Okay, yeah. So I think this is a good time to also bring up a cultural reference. As I was kind of thinking about this axis, I was just looking for something to really capture this axis, to really put it plainly. And I found this perfect example, which is Janet Jackson's album Velvet Rope, released in I think 1997, maybe 98. So I've heard this album before, but obviously it came out when I was either -1 or 0. So I did not get to really experience it in my adult life. But I revisited this album recently, and just so people know, Janet is a Taurus. She's a Taurus Sun and Mars. She's an Aries Venus. She's literally my little chart twin in some ways. But she's allegedly a Scorpio rising. Birth time is not completely accurate. We don't know, but I think Scorpio rising makes sense, and especially considering this album. Okay. The way the album starts off is with this interlude called Twisted Elegance. And it's kind of like a poem. So I'm just going to read it. And I think it would be fun to kind of talk about this a little bit within the context of Taurus and Scorpio. Twisted Elegance. It's my belief that we all have the need to feel special. And it's this need that can bring out the best in us, yet the worst in us. This need created the velvet rope.
Yep.
I feel like that's like
To
Taurus
feel
shadow.
special. That's yeah, definitely. I mean, Scorpio the same thing. Like at the end of the day, that's what Scorpio wants is someone that like sees them fully, understands them fully, and makes them feel special. You know?
So this is what they're
So
both struggling with. And it can
exactly.
bring the best in us or the worst in us. One thing I think with Taurus, and I wonder if it's a similar thing for Scorpio, but I feel like Taurus is, as soon as things don't go our way, that's when the bull comes out and it's like, oh, why not going my way? Like just like the rage of like
Yeah.
things not going the way you want them to go.
I definitely think that I see that with Scorpio as well. Like the idea of, like how they can be vengeful or how they like if someone quote unquote like betrays them. Betrayal is so real to them and like they can get to a point of almost paranoia around it. And if they feel betrayed, then it brings out a very ugly side of them. If they, so like I feel like yeah, like while you're saying like if things don't go your way, like I feel like for Scorpios that is things not going their way. It's like someone like not showing up exactly how they expected them to or want.
Oh yeah, like the emotional betrayal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And that was yeah, I definitely can see that for both. And of course she has both placements in her picture.
Right. Like, and it just continues from here. Like, this next song is Velvet Rope. And, I think it's kind of like repeating that interlude, but in the chorus and stuff. Basically, she describes the velvet rope, like in an interview, she described it as a place that's inside of us that we keep from others. Like it's like your deepest feelings, your deepest desires, one might say, which I think is very scorpionic, and you keep it away from others. But she describes the velvet rope as like her inviting people into this world of all of these, feelings. And so she says, come with me inside my velvet rope. She also makes it a point to say, outside leave judgment, outside leave hate. One loves the answer. So I think that's another way in which like this is a tender area. For me, this is the Scorpio part of it, right? You can't have hate, judgment, fear. Like there's all of those like sort of judgmental feelings that people have when it comes to those deepest feelings and desires. You have to leave that out if you're going to come sit in this deep at the depth of the ocean. Like,
and I feel like that is what I admire so much about Scorpio is their ability to literally like see you completely and love you completely. And like it reminds me of us how we were discussing the ocean and how it was like all consuming and like the words that we use, and that's very Scorpio to me, is like that love once they decide to share it with you, that trust once they decide to share it with you is so consuming and so passionate and so intense, but in the best way. Like, of course, like that's so beautiful.
In the best way, and it can be in a way that, can get a little uncomfy, but like
definitely
you have to be here. It's ultimate vulnerability, for real. And then the next song is called You, and it is a conversation that she's basically having with herself. It's almost like, to me, when I was listening to it, I was thinking about like the Scorpio part of me speaking to the Taurus part of me, because from the perspective of the song, like it seems like the narrator of the song basically is kind of sitting with some things that the person receiving the information might not want to receive. So it starts off with, here I am in your face, telling truths and not your old lies. So from right there, I feel like that kind of reminds me of Scorpio's ability to kind of just sit with the truth. Like I think Tauruses and Venusians can sit with a lie. Like they can live in a lie for a while as long as it makes them feel good. They're not going to necessarily try to like dig deep to the truth. But Scorpio's coming like, I'm telling truth. I'm in your face telling you the truth, not the lies. So right off the bat, Scorpio is spend most of your life.
Just take a second.
What
you said? You feel like Venusians can sit with a lie as long as it makes them feel good.
Yeah,
that hurt. Like, damn. Do you think that they ever get to a point where where they're consciously aware that it's a lie?
If a Taurus, oh, that's a good question. Ooh, I think if a Taurus, depending on who they have around them and how much pain they've buried, they can just keep on living in the lie. They will stay there. Like, and it's dangerous.
Not how much pain they've buried. That hurts my heart.
It's dangerous, but I'm telling you, I've seen it in a Taurus.
Sound like my tias, like my mom and my tias gossiping in the kitchen. But I'm telling you, I've seen it.
I have witnessed it, and
that's terrifying.
It's and I think it's a result of that fixed sort of like, I don't want to feel bad. I just don't want to feel bad.
And you think that they just go on their lives, like, and they're just like, I don't want to feel bad, so I'm not going to.
I think they still feel it, but they ignore it. And thus they're kind of they're being disconnected from their bodies, which is why I think that's what Scorpio is trying to, like, Scorpio says, okay, if you want to be all embodied, then you need to address the shit that you have buried.
That like hurts me as a Taurus moon to hear, just because I already have the Jupiter influence, the escapism, that's already prevalent in my life, but to hear that there's another layer of this goddamn Taurus, that makes me upset. That's hard.
It's hard. And this is what Scorpio's like, yeah, it is hard. That's why we've been here. Like,
Exactly. And that's what I feel like oh my God, this is literally what my sister was talking about. Like, she was like, I feel like there's so much going on in their lives and they just like are just like, they just out and like partying and like having a good time and looking all happy, but really like there's shit happening. And that's what I feel like she was talking about, like with the fakeness. Like, she was like, it's like just show up, like just be real, like for a second, like take it. But I feel like that's what you're saying. You're like, they can just do that. They can just go on and pretend that everything's fine with them and they won't acknowledge any of that shit. That's terrifying to me. See, like, there's no reality where I could do that. Like, I think I
well,
do, bury things, I come back to them, but I'll never just leave them there.
yeah. And I mean, I think that's where it's like you have to, that's why I said depending on, I don't think every Taurus is going to do this,
Yeah,
right?
definitely not.
But
But I
like,
think
I
that's
think,
definitely the shadow.
yeah,
Those
that's
are the
the shadow
darker
of like,
parts.
that can happen if you keep on burying your pain and burying all of the discomfort and the unpleasant things in life, then you don't have any sort of, you're almost incapable of dealing with it. Like, for what I'm talking about witnessing, I don't even know what would really, I'm curious to know what the reaction would be if
Someone pointed it out.
yeah, if they actually dug it up. Like, what might it look like? And like, the more you bury it, the scarier it becomes, you know?
I think that, like, actually, going within and actually dealing with something that you've been repressing and not dealing with for so long, I think that that is in itself a traumatic, like, event. Like, to
Right,
have to
exactly. So
bring
it's like
that.
now at this point, because because you buried it for so long, like you already have a low tolerance for discomfort. But now it's grown to be this immensely discomfort thing. Like, so now you're definitely not gonna address it because it's like it's
Yeah.
too painful at this point. Um, Whereas I
Wow.
think for Scorpios, it's like they are in when that pain happens, that's all they're making room for. So they're gonna sit and
Immediately.
dwell,
Exactly.
right? But and I think the flip side of it is like them dwelling in the pain.
Exactly.
And
Yeah, like
now they're just
they
as
need to like that's not healthy either, like sitting in that forever and not moving out of it, Like it's one thing to experience your emotions, but it's another to sit in it and to dwell and to not like heal from it or to not let it
right.
go in a way that I'm sure Taurus has the ability to, from what I've heard.
Well, like let go
No, not let it go, but yeah.
yeah, ignore it. Like
What
I
we
feel
were
like
talking about.
they're doing it's a very similar act of like staying in your comfort zone. That's what they're both
Yeah.
doing. Like Scorpio is comfortable in the pain sometimes. And they're
Yeah.
going to stay there because it's actually scary to think like what would it mean for me to experience pleasure. They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh wow, like I can have a pleasurable experience."
Yeah.
They'd rather stay where they know, like,
In what's familiar for them in
right.
that
And the
same way,
same thing for
Taurus.
Taurus. We'd rather stay what's familiar with me, which is this like what's
The
familiar
good
and
stuff.
feels good, which is like, but they both might be a lie because a lot of the times too, for Scorpios, your pain, like not to say, not to say your pain is a lie, but
A lot of times your pain is a lie.
but I do think Scorpios sometimes can see it from such a one-sided perspective that it's like there's no room for for you to have relief. Sometimes I think your emotions can be blinding, right? And I think this is where, air signs and, the other, and even sometimes earth signs, like they can help you to realize, like, when you're viewing things completely from an emotional lens, it's very hard to be pragmatic. And I think that's where Tauruses can come in, can be like, we have to we have to situate it a little bit because if you only view it through this emotional turmoil, you're not going to be able to see the situation for its fullness. You're never going to be able to see it for its fullness because all you know is your emotions on the subject. And that's great. But if you actually want to get to some resolution, you can't stay there.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, okay, and then the just one last song. I mean, this whole album is just wonderful. It's okay. actually one last interlude, and this is really what I'm trying to explain when I say you can't just stay there. It is the interlude called Memory, and the lyrics go, "You don't have to hold on to the pain to hold on to the memory." That's Taurus. That's what Taurus is trying to tell Scorpio. Because if you hold on to the pain, that's going to impact your body.
Mm-hmm.
And Taurus wants to protect the body. And I know Scorpio wants to protect the emotional world. And so Scorpios might be feeling like, but if I don't hold on to the pain, then no one's going to acknowledge it. It's going to get overlooked, da, 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 da. And that's a valid, conclusion. But as you grow, you realize that that pain is not beneficial for you. It's not beneficial for your thriving and your growth. So
Yeah.
you can hold
Honestly,
on to the memory, but the pain has to go.
yeah, and honestly, at the end of the day, like everything that we've been saying is really just like it's like a need for to feel validated in how they're feeling. And I feel like like same idea. Like I don't know, I keep connecting it back to Libra because I do see like similarities in the before and after of every zodiac. But like just understanding that like someone else seeing it exactly how you see it is not going to make your situation better or make you feel better
Mhm.
always. Like there's going to be times where you have to literally do that for yourself, and also people won't show up how you want them to all the time, and that's okay, and like that's out of your control. And that's their problem, is that they have a lot of like they feel like they can control things that can't be controlled.
Mm,
And I
I
think
think,
Taurus
so
also
yeah, Taurus,
is
I was
that
gonna
way.
say, I think all the fixed signs like to be in control, because if you're trying to maintain something, you can't have shit just flying everywhere. Like you need to
Yeah.
be able to control all of the factors so that things can go the way that you want them to
You
go.
want it. Exactly, exactly. And that's what I feel like Scorpio wants, is that like that external validation to like in a way like control other people's emotions. Literally
Yes,
control
yes,
how you feel. Cause it's not
yes.
even like it's not even like they'll be fulfilled with like you seeing their point of view, but it's like they want you to feel what they feel.
Exactly. But it's like you can't control other people's feelings. And I think this axis is very much an axis of
Control.
control. Yeah, like,
A
and
need for control.
right. And I think for Tauruses, it's like this physical sort of security control where it's like if I can control all my resources and I can control all of the things that make me feel physically safe, then I can maintain my safety forever. And I can also, you know, be glorious in it because I'm Venusian, right? So I can maintain my safety and have
Florida.
a great time. Um,
Yeah.
but it's like how many things are really in your control at the end of the day? Like,
But in the same way, like while you're saying it's like I feel like Taurus is, and this was something that I think that we had talked about months back when we talked about this in the first place, is that they have that same ability to be emotionally manipulative, but they can do it in a more Venusian way that's more subtle and like harder to decipher because of that charismatic nature. But at the end of the day, it's their need or their desire to control their environment, or
yeah.
like in a
And I think
similar
that's
way to Libra wanting harmonious environments or like whatever, but they can, yeah, like that, like in order for them to feel safe or to feel secure, but at the end of the day it's still manipulative and it's harder
yeah.
to see.
I think that Tauruses and Scorpios can definitely be equally manipulative in the way that Taurus goes about it, because they are receiving the benefits from Venus in terms of how they're received and how they're able to be charming. It can be much more under the radar where it's like, oh, you didn't even know you were being emotionally manipulated into doing this thing. Whereas Scorpios bring a level of intensity that I think Tauruses don't. And so because they have that intensity, people are automatically like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like,
And I also feel like that's part of the whole Scorpio being like, what the fuck? How come you're doing the same thing I'm doing, but people like are
yeah,
more receptive to what you're doing? Because it's
right.
like they
But
don't have that
really,
Venusian charm. They don't have that. that subtlety.
Right. And really, Taurus and Scorpio want to hook up to do bad things and they can trade notes on emotional manipulation. But really, what they should be talking about is like, why are we trying to emotionally manipulate people in the first place? Like, maybe we need to figure out what is
our need, and maybe we can communicate that with people. What maybe we can ask and have that be consensual rather than a sense of control, rather than
right.
like trying to trick them into it. Like,
Or like,
once we know,
why do we feel comfortable with controlling people? Like, what are we trying to fulfill, really? Like, are we
I
trying to get
feel
that
like that's
security? Because it's like, you can't, if the only way you can get security is if you're in control, then that security is not stable because you are not always going to be able to be in control. So,
right. No, yeah, but I feel like, like psychologically, when when people show up in a emotionally manipulative or just manipulative way, it's because they feel that they're not, like, their needs are not being met. That's what, like, so like I feel like that's their problem. The problem with like Scorpio and Taurus is that they kind of just like they expect people to know these things without actually expressing it. Because I feel like for Scorpio, it's like they know, they have this intrinsic knowledge of what you might need, and they have like there's like intuition, and so they're just like, why can't you do the same thing? Like, why aren't you a powerful witch like me? And then for both of them, it's like they struggle with the vulnerability of um I feel like expressing your needs, like actually expressing them, is a really vulnerable thing to do. And instead of just like expecting people to know or manipulating people into it, it's really hard, and it doesn't come naturally to some people. So I feel like that's maybe why like their first thought, or like their first plan of action, is to just trick you into it. Is to just manipulate you into it, because they they struggle with vulnerability,
and they don't
like,
trust.
and they don't trust.
They don't trust that their
Exactly.
needs will be met. And I think that
Exactly.
that's probably kind of more surprising, I think, to hear for a Taurus, because it's like, because they don't trust that their needs will be met, they're the ones that meet their needs. So
Exactly.
that's why they don't really express, because it's like, I just need to go get what I need because no one else is going to take care of me the way that I'm going to take care of me. And that's the most Taurus thing I can really think of right now. That and don't rush me. Don't rush me. That's
Yeah.
two Taurus statements. Like, I'm gonna get what I need because I can't like, and it's not that Tauruses are not going to be receptive if someone decides to come and give you what you need. Like,
Yeah.
they can be receptive to caretaking
Definitely.
very
They'll
much,
take
but
it. If you
yeah,
have something to offer them that they want, they'll take it.
right. But I don't know if they fully trust, or like, I think that's the journey for both Taurus and Scorpio, is to trust that you are deserving and will receive what you need physically and emotionally. You don't have to control people in order to get what you need.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. I would like to end it off with the last song on this other thing, because I think she ends it so beautifully, and I think it's a good, like, more
Way
happier
to
note,
close
maybe.
out. Mhm.
Yeah. So in the final song of Velvet Rope, she starts it off with "Hey Jay." So she's talking to herself, and she's like, it's basically like coming back to this notion of feeling special, which we established in the beginning, we think is a very Taurus and Scorpio thing, of like, you just want to feel special, and that can bring out the best or the worst in us. Um, and she says, it's been a long time since I've seen you last. So that this is kind of like a coming home to self, right? And she says, I'm well, though I've gone through some deep changes in my life. It hasn't been easy. It's been difficult at times. Sometimes I'd sit down and cry and ask God, oh, why? Like, I think that's like that pain that, you know, Scorpio has been holding for a long time.
Mhm.
Um, And then the response is like, I know how you're feeling. Same thing I did deal with. And I think this is Taurus saying like, yeah, I actually had some pain too that I buried and did not address. So you're not as alone as you may feel. This is actually so beautiful. Like the Taurus Scorpio, I just feel like this is what they're saying to each other. Like you've been hurting. Like, yeah, me too. You're not alone right now, like in the pain that you're feeling, even though it feels like you are. And then she says, we have to deal with our past. I know it's painful, but there you'll find specialness because everybody needs to feel real special. We need to remember the love lies deep within ourselves. We have to want it. So it starts with us and no one else. We must learn we're all born with specialness inside of us. That is what we're talking about right now. Like we all deserve to be loved. And I think that's like Scorpio and Taurus kind of going back and realizing like now that I've dealt with the pain and dealt with the past and dealt with the stuff that I've buried and dwelled in or whatever, like we have to come back and remember the love lies deep within us and
we
want
are
to feel
worthy of
special.
that love. We, of that comfort, of that security within yourself.
Yeah.
And
And
I saw you get emotional. I was like, look
yeah,
who's the crier now.
I had a little tear almost come just because it's like holding that space. And I think after thinking about this episode, I'm like, wow, Tauruses and Scorpios really need each other. Like really need each other. To deal with to help themselves and help the other signs throughout the zodiac heal. Like it's a healing axis. And I think there's other axes that I would also say are healing, but this is to me is about like that body soul healing.
Yeah, I feel like that this axis is definitely like the mind and the body and the soul. But it's also like, I don't know, like the pleasure and like the intimacy and
right. And
that, yeah.
And I think all those to me, like that has to do with the body and the soul. Like
exactly.
Like why do they think like
two sides of the same coin?
Right. Like, when you have, good sex, your soul is snatched, right? Like it's not just bodies interacting. This is deeper. Like there's in the process of the bodies interacting, there's like this much more
emotional.
Yeah.
The emotional intimacy of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think my big takeaway is if you want to understand the Taurus Scorpio axis, listen to Velvet Rope, listen to Janet's entire discography, but like please listen to Velvet Rope because I think it's like so spot on. My other tidbit for a good Scorpio character in pop culture is Maleficent. That is the Scorpio story to me. Like Maleficent had some fucked up shit happen to her. And then she became the villain, but that's only because of the stuff that happened to her. And she was just trying to protect her forest of all the little tender creatures that are so vulnerable to these poachers and these the real villains, right? Which is like, but she's just been cast away from society. And then she learns to love again through Aurora, who I think in some ways embodies certain Taurus placements. So, and it's interesting because there's a point in which Aurora is trying to protect Maleficent because she is like the princess in the kingdom. So she has the privilege to protect her, kind of. And I was like, you know what? I think all the Scorpios need to get behind the Tauruses. Like Tauruses, we have to use our earthly strength to protect these
gentle, warm little hearts.
Yes, okay? Like Scorpio, I mean, it might seem like Scorpio should be the fighters because they're the Martians, but like they might not be as equipped. Like they have some shit going on, and we do too. We need to
unpack, don't bury.
Yeah, don't bury anymore.
The lesson at the end of the day today is for everyone listening, not just Tauruses, but specifically Tauruses, unpack, don't bury, heal. And for Scorpios,
you got to process it. and you can't don't hold on. What is it? You don't have to hold on to the pain to hold on to the memory. And the only
Yes.
way to start to really like surgically figure that out, that's a Scorpio word, surgic. But the only way to really figure that out is like you'll probably need someone to help you through it, honestly. You probably won't be able to do it alone.
Yeah.
But this is my way of saying seek therapy. But I'm trying to
And
say
there's nothing wrong with that, and that's not in an offensive way at all. Like therapy
no, like
is
it's
so
not.
helpful.
Yes,
We
I
both
think
have
everybody
been
needs to do
or
it, but I
are.
also want to acknowledge that, you know, within Western capitalism, patriarchal society, therapy is not a one size fits all, and it's not necessarily going to fix everything. And it
Yeah,
might not
but
fix anything.
the lesson at
So,
hand is don't wallow, feel and process your emotions, but then let them go or try your best.
like that's why
Yeah.
the moon falls in Scorpio. Like if you have a
Yeah.
Scorpio moon, that's why it can be tough because you're just stuck here with this.
And that's also why they're called emotions. They're not supposed to just sit
Oh,
there.
they're supposed to be in motion.
Exactly. Let it go. Let it pass through you. But that's
Yeah.
easier said than done.
Easier said than
We're in our
done.
therapy moment. We're in our Pisces rising moments, okay? If you need help, reach out. DM us on
Good.
Instagram.
Literally. No, don't do that. But yeah, that's Taurus and Scorpio. I don't know. I feel like it's just it's a deep one, and I feel like it can be hard to understand, and I hope people are able to sit with it. And I think it can also, I mean, at least for me, it can bring up like some, just hard stuff for both signs, I think. And
Yeah.
so for everyone listening, if you need to take some time, deep breaths, or maybe you didn't feel like it was that intense at all and you just chilling, but
I can't believe we got through this entire recording without mentioning how actually I am a Scorpio stellium in sidereal.
oh yeah, I was gonna bring that up. I was definitely
Yeah.
bring that up.
So I definitely do resonate with a lot of this. And I feel like I learned a lot here. So it was a really nice conversation. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing with me, Tone.
Thank
Always
you,
fun
Silver.
experience.
Listen, this was much needed, and I'm gonna be sitting with this for a while, I think. I think all of our conversations I sit with, but like this one I think is one that, again, I don't think everybody is, quite ready to sit with. Like we're talking about the body and the soul and connecting those things. Like what?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, fun times. My type of stuff. I love this.
My kind of shit. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in this episode. We will see you next time. And check out our YouTube if you want to watch our video cast at all, As Above, So Below podcast.
Yes. But if you stay on the audio only, I'm not gonna be mad at you because
Either or is fine with us, but it's been real, guys. Mwah.
see ya.